Hello there and welcome. My name's Harry Holling and I'm part of the CRM development team here at Ansett Australia. Usually our CRM courses cover accidents that happen overseas. They are fatal and quite often they're caused by crew error. The video we have for you today is different. It concerns an incident that happened here in Australia to one of our aircraft. The crew did a good job in sorting out their situation, and the best part is they're still around to talk to us. We're going to recreate that incident and then interview the crew after that. The flight that they were on was from Karratha to Perth, about a 2-hour flight. They were up at their cruise level and they suffered an engine rollback. That meant that the aircraft was descending without engine power, without hydraulic power, without electrical power, and they'd lost pressurisation. They happily regained their power and landed, but that situation could happen to any one of us, regardless of the aircraft type that we're on. You may remember a 747 having troubles near a cyclone off Queensland some years ago, or even in the Flight Safety Foundation report, a story of a 737 that landed on a levee bank in the eastern United States. So it could happen to any of us. When you watch the reenactment, look for the crew communications, the briefings, the situational awareness, and come with me now while we go to see the reenactment.
That is checked. There's that storm up ahead that we were passing down before. It's really built up.
Might go right of that storm, eh?
Yeah, okay. What do you reckon?
Miles?
About 20 miles.
Yeah,
That'll put us
30 miles by track.
30 miles. That'll be just about right, I reckon.
Fine.
You just clear that
You want to
out.
ask about the Tango 6-1 position?
Yep. Okie doke. I'll do that. Right. Looks like there might be a bit of turbulence in that. I'll get Dave up here to see if he can delay the service.
Yes, Phil.
Dave, look, we've got a bit of weather ahead. We're going around it. Should be smooth enough. But what I might ask you to do is delay the service if you can for about 20 minutes. How does that sound?
No problem, Phil. I've just finished the bar service and we're all set for dinner, but I'll hang off on it until I...
Yeah, good. Okay, I'll let you know as soon as we clear the weather. Thanks.
Guys, we're going to hold off on the service for a minute. Phil said we could have some bumps coming up. So we just clear the cabin and just keep all this here until we're ready to go.
As we passed a beam of thunderstorm, we entered an area of warm air with the temperature increased from about minus 39 degrees to about minus 24 degrees over the space of less than a minute. At the same time, we entered moist air and put us in icing conditions. The aircraft was unable to maintain altitude and airspeed, so we commenced a descent to 29,000 feet, believing that that would put us in denser air and that the aircraft would be able to maintain that altitude. Julie Papa, left flight level 310. Right, yeah, speed's still decaying. Give us max continuous thrust. Hey, check out that M1. Number 4 engine M1's right back. TGT's up, the N2's okay. We're having troubles here, Bevan. I'm taking over the aircraft.
Okay, heading over.
Right, it's my aircraft.
Just taking a bit long. I think I might just pop in and see how things are going up front. Take a minute.
Okay.
You've got max continuous thrust.
Yep, that's
numbers 1, 2 and 3 are okay. Number 4 is slow. 2's
Oh, what's that
low.
annunciator that just came on? We've got an air supply.
Yeah, number 4 intake low pressure, number air faults, number
Right.
4 engine.
Number 4 engine. Stand by, Dave. Yep. All right, let's have a look what I've got. I'll just put it in airspeed hold at 220 knots here for the moment.
It's 1,000 feet to altitude.
That's checked. There's the altitude left for 290. We're not going to be able to maintain 290. Request to descent to 250.
Julie, request for descent flight level 250.
Yep. Autopilot's out.
Julie,
250.
flight level 250.
That was the autopilot disconnecting. I'm hand flying the aircraft.
Check, Dave.
250 is checked.
250 set.
Right, Dave, looks like we've got a problem with our engines here. I want you to put everything away in the cabin and report back to me as soon as you've done that.
Okay, I'll let you guys know.
Thanks.
Deb, can you come up here for a minute? Guys, looks like they've got a real problem up the front here. They're flat out, so Phil just wants us to get everything packed away now.
Right.
Galley and cabin.
Okay, I'll do the galley.
Okay, well, I'll clear the cabin.
Number 4 is over temp.
Number 4 is over temping. All right, I'm going to bring it back to fried idle. Number 4 thrust lever.
Confirmed.
Fried idle.
Still over temping.
Still over temping. We've got N2 and N1 are very low. Shut it down, Bevan.
Number 4 thrust lever.
Confirmed.
Number 4 thrust lever is fuel off.
That's checked. Got MCT on the other engines. We're losing power on all the engines now, Bevan.
Okay.
Yep, Bevan, I want you to make a pan call, and I think we're closest to Carnarvon. Tell him we're diverting to Carnarvon at the moment, and we can't maintain altitude.
Pan, 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 pan. Perth control, Juliet Par, partial failure of power on all engines, unable to maintain altitude, diverting to Carnarvon.
Juliet Par, copy pan call. Request inbound track and estimate when convenient.
Juliet Par, standby.
Bevan, get us the tracks and distances to Meeker and Carnarvon for us, will you? I just want to make sure which is closer.
Standby.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to relight number 4 engine. The ignition is on, continuous on both. Number 4, into slow.
Okay.
Which one's closest?
Okay, Meekatharra is the closest by about 10 miles. It's bearing 168, 132 miles.
Yeah, all right.
About 140 miles away.
Tell him that we're diverting to Meekatharra now.
And Perth control, Juliet Par amendment to that. We're now diverting to Meekatharra. Inbound track 168. Standby for estimate.
All right, stand by, Dave. Won't be a sec. I've lit off number 4 engine. It's lit off. It's just stable. It's not going anywhere. The N2's low. The TGT's all right. And the N1's...
NGT's still high on that one there.
Yep, we'll leave it where it is.
Okay, that's fine.
All
It's
the engines
decreasing.
are down, right down, 40, 50%. Get us out the loss of all engines checklist, please. All right, I'm hand flying on standby instruments. Stop that.
Okay, loss of all engines drill.
Go ahead.
Okay, thrust levers, fuel off.
All right, just have a think about that for a minute. I don't think that's the appropriate drill. We've got manageable TGTs are all okay. The N2s are very low, and we're not in volcanic ash, so we'll discontinue the drill, and we'll attempt some relights a bit later on and just get under control. Okay?
Yeah, Bevan, fly the airplane for a minute.
Okay.
On it, standby instruments. Dave, I've got a major problem on all engines. We've lost power on all the engines. I want you to prepare for a forced landing in rugged terrain. Time available is about 12 to 15 minutes. Use all available exits and use as much speed as you can once we touch down. Understand that? Any questions?
Okay, we've got a loss of power on all engines. 12 to 15 minutes left of flying. It's going to be a forced landing in rugged terrain. All exits can be used, and we want to get out as quick as we can.
That's correct, and I want you to let me know when you've got the cabin prepared, ready for my PA.
Okay guys, come in here. We've got a real emergency here. We've got a loss of power on all engines. We've got 12 to 15 minutes before we land. It's going to be a forced landing in rugged terrain. All exits are to be used that are available, and we want to get them out as fast as we possibly can. Understand that?
Yes.
Okay, grab your books, get back up here as quick as you can.
Okay, Joe.
At this stage, the aircraft electrical system was struggling to maintain power to the aircraft, and as a consequence there was a lot of relay chatter from generators cutting on and offline, associated warnings flashing on both the overhead and the master warning panel, a lot of noise associated with the relay chatter. In consultation with Bevan, we turned our anti-ice systems off, and as Bevan was getting some checklists out, I restarted number 4 engine. That engine started all right, but would not accelerate to a point where it produced any thrust, and went to the same stage as all the other engines, no thrust. Following that, we found ourselves in a position where we had to declare an emergency, had to get the cabin crew to prepare for our forced landing and brief them accordingly. and found ourselves in a situation facing a forced landing in very hostile terrain in the dark. Right, there's cabin high altitude, Bevan. I'm going to put my oxygen mask on, handing over.
Taking over.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Can hear you fine.
All right, taking over the aircraft now.
Handing over.
Okay. Alright, just going to make a Mayday call now, proceeding to megaphone.
Okay. Mayday, 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 Juliet, Juliet, the fire, Juliet, Juliet, the fire, California, the fire, singing to Earth, megaphone, 5-2, POV.
Attention, attention, listen closely. The captain has asked me to advise you that due to an operational problem, it will be necessary to carry out an emergency landing.
Copy your Mayday call. Does it look like you'll make it out this time?
Juliet, negative, negative.
Standing by.
Okay, ready to deploy the passenger oxygen?
2,000 today.
Yep, passenger oxygen out.
It is essential that you remain very calm and do exactly as instructed. Place the mask over your nose and mouth, secure with the strap, breathe normally. Place the mask over your nose and mouth and breathe normally. Place the mask over your nose and mouth, the elastic strap round your head and breathe normally.
Okay, Bevan, I want you to start the LPU.
Okay. Going up. Okay, APU towers available.
APU available?
It's checked, yes.
Alright, I want you to turn off all the engine modes.
Engineers.
Engineer off.
Okay, engineers are okay, yep.
And the pits off.
The
Generators off.
generator 4 is off. Generator 1 off.
The standby generator off.
Standby generator is set and off.
And the hydraulic systems off.
Okay, hydraulic duct 2 off and duct 2.
Alright, and stable power supply out.
Okay.
Okay, we've got a stable power supply, altitude 17,000 feet. Going to try relighting engines 1 and 2.
Okay.
Number 1 off, number 2 is still off.
The Mayday call had been made sometime before the cabin was secure. The flight attendants were in the brace position, or not in the brace position, waiting for the brace position call on the emergency bell.
Yeah.
And everything was, you know, in my mind, everything was organised and ready for the impact, if you like, on the touchdown. And having got that out of the way, having notified air traffic control of where we were likely to be when we hit the ground, that was all underway. There was aircraft being diverted towards our position already. So at about that time, when the auxiliary power unit started and gave me a stable power supply, I elected to formulate a plan of attempting to relight or attempting to get the engines working. So in concert with Bevan, we systematically went through, and as I flew the aircraft, Bevan turned off all the switches which load up the engines, the air conditioning bleed switches, the hydraulic pumps and the electrical generators. And this was to give the engines the best possible chance of accelerating, which they weren't doing. So we were working on our engines, and we got to the stage at about 13,000 feet, where the time to impact would have been probably 4 minutes, I suppose. And it seemed that nothing was working.
Taking for a 130.
Let's check. Bring the thrust levers up to a mid position, see what happens. Looking. Any response there?
High T2T 760, 790 number 1. No response in 1s or in 2s.
Right, let's have a closer look at it.
Check number 3 is coming up.
And 2s are still low, TGTs are okay. In 1s, 20%, 30%, that's no use to us at all.
Yeah. Number 1 starting to move.
Number 1 starting to move. Righto, stand by. Fly the airplane in. How's number 1 looking?
Number 1 looks normal.
Righto. Looks good. Now we need the other ones to come up.
Approaching front of a 110.
So it is number 3 coming up.
Okay. So.
So what do we got? We've got number 1 and number 3.
Number 3.
Yep. 80% TGTs are good, stable. Looks like we might be able to hold 110 here.
Yeah.
Alright, with 10,000 feet, oxygen mask off.
Okay.
Righto. What's happening? Number 2
Number
is
1,
coming good.
number 3 looking good.
Yeah. Number 2's on its way. Fantastic. Oh, I think we're going to be alright now.
Okay.
And number 4, 10,500 feet.
It's checked.
Fantastic. Wow, what was that? It's incredible.
Okay, all your T2Ts are
How's
below
it looking?
limits. Hen
Yep.
1s are fine, in 2s 87, 86%.
Yep.
Okay, it looks like it's stabilised.
Alright, let's see if we can
And,
restore some systems. I want to get the autopilot in, so I need
check.
some generators online, please.
Righto.
Bevan.
Generator number 1
Yep.
is online. Generator number 4 is online.
Alright, let's just take stock of the situation. We're stable, we've got electrics, our engines are going well. I'll just call Dave on the intercom and tell him we're no longer. Just fly the airplane for us a
Okay,
second.
taking over.
Handing over. Right, I have the aircraft again. Thanks.
Handing over. I'll get it.
Righto, autopilot's engaged.
Okay, heading mode's in now.
Heading mode, altitude hold at 10,500 feet and
That's
speed
checked.
good. Okay, I'll give Dave a call. Stand by for a sec. Oh, Dave, it's Phil. Look, everything's under control now. We've got the aircraft, all the engines have come back to full power. We're maintaining altitude and we're heading towards Meekatharra. At this stage we'll look like being on the ground in about 12 or 13 minutes with a normal landing at Meeka. You can get up now and move around the cabin, look after the passengers, let me know if there's any problems with the passengers, and when you've done that, come in and we'll just update the situation. Okay, Bevan, let's get the systems back to where they were. We'll get the
generators are on.
hydraulics on.
Okay. Pump 3 is restored. Pump 2 is reinstalled.
Righto, we've got 70 miles to run to Meekatharra. We've got to give ATC a call, tell them ops are normal.
Will do.
Proceeding to Meekatharra, don't think we go to Perth, do you?
I think we're going to Meekatharra.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I
That's about enough.
don't know what's wrong with this airplane, but
Okay.
I'm not taking it to Perth, so
I understood.
get to Meekatharra. Just work out a quick estimate and you make the radio call.
Yeah, okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The captain speaking. I realise we've been through quite an ordeal in the last 15 minutes or so. However, it's important to understand that everything is now normal. We've restored power to the aircraft engines, so we're maintaining altitude. In view of the aircraft's performance over the last 15 minutes or so, we don't feel it's wise to continue towards Perth, and we're diverting to land at Meekatharra. We'll have you on the ground there in 10 or 15 minutes or so. I'd like to thank you for your cooperation. If there's anything we can do for you, please advise the flight attendants.
Okay, well I really enjoyed seeing that reenactment. I really got excited when I saw the engine spooling up again. I think that would have been one of the greatest sounds I could ever imagine. But we've seen the reenactment, now we've gathered the crew together so that we can ask a few questions and to see how they felt about the show and what they have learned from this exercise. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for coming along, and I'd like to introduce firstly the captain, Phil, First Officer Bevan,
Hi.
Flight Attendant was Louise, Purser was Dave, and another flight attendant was Debbie. They've kindly consented to talk to us today, but first of all I want to know, you've been through the reenactment, did it make you feel uncomfortable in any way, seeing it all happen again? Phil?
No, it didn't. It was an interesting experience to go through it in the simulator. I wouldn't probably have liked to have done it immediately after the event, but having had 3 years to acclimatise to the idea, it was quite an exciting thing. Got the adrenaline going for a while.
Yeah.
Mm.
Debbie, any reactions?
When you first discussed to us whether we would do this or not, I felt a bit, oh, do I have to go through all that again? But I think it's been beneficial to go through it and relive a few of those memories and put things into perspective again.
Was this the first time that you flew together as a crew, as flight attendants and as pilots?
First time.
Yes.
First time for everybody, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Bevan and Phil
Likewise.
the same?
I don't think I'd flown with Phil prior to that particular flight, and he left the aircraft shortly after. I don't think I flew with him again.
Right.
It's a one-off experience.
This brings me to the team building exercise. You seem to work well as a team. What contributes to making a good team like that?
For me, that particular day, it was a Sunday, afternoon, evening flight. Very relaxed. Phil arrived at the aircraft in a relaxed manner and gave us a briefing as to the weather and the NOTAMs, etc. He was in a good mood, it relaxed me, I was in a good mood, and I guess that sort of flowed on through from there.
Did that flow through to the flight attendants as well? Did you feel?
Yeah.
Did you get a specific briefing before the flight from Phil?
Yeah, Phil's always been good with his briefings, and he gave us a briefing beforehand, which I passed on to the flight attendants.
With small groups like this, small crews like this, it's quite okay to have intimate type briefings, but now, Phil, you've gone onto a bigger aircraft type where you've got bigger crew numbers. Do you find that that personal briefing breaks down? Are there any ways of making sure that everybody is included in the team?
Yes, I don't think it breaks down so much. Perhaps it's not as intimate always, but I think if you make the effort to approach the crew before the flight, and one of the things perhaps since this incident that I've been concentrating on trying to develop was to approach the crew as a whole, where it's possible. Obviously on days where it's really rushed, it isn't. Sometimes you'll find the purser briefing the flight attendants in the forward part of the aircraft. I like to walk up and just stand and make myself part of the group while she finishes. And when she does, brief the flight attendants as well as the purser and sort of say hello to them all. Now, when that's possible, I think that's good because it establishes a rapport or a team, and you're welcome to talk to me whenever you like. When it's not possible, of course, you get the purser aside. Sometimes it's so rushed, as you know, there's just not time to be intimate with people. But even in the aerobridge, sometimes you can get the group together as a team instead of waiting till you get on the aeroplane. Just say, oh, hi everybody, look, I'm Phil, and the flight time and the pertinent weather details. So everybody gets it and part of the team. The interesting thing I've noticed sometimes, though, is when they finish their briefing, you turn to talk to the purser and start telling her the pertinent details of the flight, and sometimes the flight attendants will sort of drift off and go and do their job as if it's not their concern. And if it was possible, I'd like to stress that it is everybody's interests to sort of be part of the team.
So really everybody has to make that extra little bit of effort to make sure that they are included at that stage.
Yeah, I'd like to see that the flight attendants, whether they're working way down the back of a 767 or whatever, feel that they're an important part of the briefing, always, even if it's just a routine thing, just to establish some rapport as a team rather than, they're up the front and all we're down the back, it doesn't matter.
I really like what Phil said about the crew being around when the captain gives the briefing to the purser, is it's not always possible with cleaners and caterers coming on, and you have tasks to do, like check the aircraft equipment and that. But the times when I've been on a bigger aircraft and you've got the crew just happen to be in the foregoing or on the aerobridge and the captain's come up, said hello, introduced himself, I really appreciate that. It makes it a much easier day. You know what's going, you feel much more in part of a team.
Yeah. I notice on the bigger aircraft it seems to be the isolation gets bigger between the cockpit and the cabin crew, and they just seem to separate more. And I think it's something that everybody has to put in a little bit extra to try to keep the team together. The bigger the aircraft gets, the harder it is.
I've had a few captains recently who've put their head in the door when we've been doing our briefing as well, in the briefing room.
Yeah.
And they've given us a briefing then, and that's been good too.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally underestimated the importance of these briefings, partly prior to a flight. I think it's going to be an ordinary flight. I know it's an ordinary flight. But that doesn't mean that you know it as the rest of the crew. And it really is important, even on an ordinary flight, to say, look, the flight times are standard, we're going to be on time, and I don't anticipate any problems.
An ordinary flight's not necessarily going to remain an ordinary flight.
No. The decision-making process has got me intrigued. You had to make decisions even though you didn't know what was wrong with the aircraft. What was the process that you had to go through to come up with the decisions you needed?
Every decision-making process is individual and different. In this case, the decisions were being forced upon us as a team, Bevan and myself. We didn't have much of an option as to the events that were happening around us. The aircraft was losing height, approaching altitudes, problems were starting to develop, and there was a requirement for a certain level of decision-making, even if it was just to fly the aircraft, ensure that there was safety and control. It was quite a long period of assessing what the problem was, and I've often thought about the old adage, you know, when something goes wrong, sit on your hands. It's an old one, but it's a good one. There are a lot of thoughts going through my mind as to what could be causing the problem, and perhaps if I'd have acted on some of them immediately, it would have been the wrong course of action and led to a much worse situation. So although I didn't know exactly what to do, I wanted to do things because the human mind sort of says, look, there's a problem, fix it real quick. You've got to sit on those hands and say, well, hang on, let's just see what develops. Is there something I can do in accordance with standard operating procedures? And I think it's also important to take standard operating procedures into account when you're making a decision. So that's just another facet of, can I act within standard operating procedures? Are they going to help me?
Obviously, you couldn't apply standard procedures to a lot of these things because you didn't actually have a clear definition. I noticed at one stage you called for a checklist that wasn't appropriate, loss of all engines, and you decided, well, we haven't really lost all our engines, we sort of, but haven't. But I don't think I think you used the word, that's not an appropriate checklist or something, didn't you?
Yes, that's right. It was the only standard operating procedure that I could think of available to me. So I had to consider it as an option. I wanted Bevan to get it out. It gave him a feeling of doing something, a mere feeling of heading towards resolving an issue.
Yeah.
But after consideration, when Bevan said it's ready, I thought, well, no, this is not appropriate. It's for flight and volcanic ash. It's for different engine indications. I'm going to have to not continue it. I'll just sit on my hands a little bit longer and see what happens.
Yeah. I noticed when the pilots are busy up there, they've got the instruments in front of them, they can see what's going on. They're not really sure. Did you down the back notice that something was wrong? Did you have a feeling that we might be in danger here? When were you first aware that this was a serious situation?
We were having a fair bit of turbulence, weren't we? And we delayed our service because of that, on the pilot's decision that we should delay that, and we're glad we did that. It would have been worse with everything else.
Yeah.
But at that stage we just thought it was turbulence.
We just thought it was turbulence.
Not a problem.
So when did you know for the first time that, hey, today is the day?
You were briefing to the cockpit, weren't you?
So
well, I went up to the cockpit.
That briefing, was it?
And well, I knew straight away, as just seeing the guys, what they were doing, that there was a major problem, or there was a problem. But it wasn't until I got the actual briefing that it was going to be a forced landing that I realised that, well, yes, this is the day. This is going to be what we've been trained for.
So I noticed in the recreation that you walked into the cockpit, but you didn't get spoken to straight away. Why was that? You seemed to be in there for a while before they finally talked to you. Why was that?
Well, just by watching the guys, it was obvious they were flat out. Just their conversation and the lights that were flashing in the cockpit, you could tell that they had their hands full. They were busy.
They were having a colourful night, were they?
You could say that, yeah.
I noticed in the recreation there were quite a few lights coming on and all that sort of stuff. Were you aware that Dave was in there at the time of the incident?
Yes, I was. Yes, whether I sensed or whatever, I knew Dave had walked in.
But you just didn't have time to talk to him at that time, is it?
No, the situation was escalating very quickly, and there were, control of the aircraft, flying on standby instruments, getting used to that, and just seeing what was happening. And whilst I wanted to be able to sort of tell Dave what was going on, I really would have not been appropriate for the moment, and I was very grateful that he stood there and waited. He knew that I knew he was there, I'm pretty sure, and he just waited, and I think that's probably the most valuable time-saving moment for me. It gave me time to channel my energies into the very important thing, and then when I figured I had it under control, I was able to devote the time
he was
to
there
Dave.
when you needed him, he was there.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. So I commend that as an action.
Yeah. I want to go back to that briefing now. When you came into the cockpit, Phil finally made time and he briefed you that you had, what was it, 10 to 15 minutes or 12 to 15 minutes before a forced landing, and all of a sudden you think, whoa, today we're going to have this accident perhaps. Then Phil didn't have time to do the PA. You were expected to go out there, and everything that you told the other two flight attendants and the passengers was based purely on that briefing. Did that give you enough information to go then and fill in your procedures in the cabin?
It was a minimum briefing, but as I say, I knew the guys were so busy, you just couldn't ask questions. The information that he did give me was enough. That's all we needed. Yeah. And that's all we needed to work on. I mean, I'm sure it would have been great to have more information as to where are you heading and what are you looking for and all the rest. But obviously, time constraints was there.
And in order to brief the passengers, we had enough information to switch into whichever procedure we needed to go into.
Did you find your procedures were straightforward then? Once you were set on a particular task, did it go straight forward, or did you have problems with your briefings and?
The procedures that we get, the printed procedures. I mean, I found it just such a relief. As soon as you go and pick up your procedure and you got it there, you don't even need to look at it because you know it off by heart. You get it drilled into you from training school. But as soon as you got it in your hands, it really does calm you down, just because you have this set procedure to follow. It's very clear cut. Done that. You work your way through it. I mean, we didn't have any trouble with it because we knew it, but just having it in your hand.
Well, the cabin lighting was so dim at times that it was hard to read them.
Yeah.
But and so you had to go on memory.
But it was the security of knowing it was there if you needed it.
Yeah.
You had it
as a checklist.
So all of a sudden all that regimented training was a major benefit.
Yeah.
Made you feel warm and good, did it?
Well, I don't know about warm and good.
No, it made you feel focused.
We had a job to do, and it helped us get on and do it.
Yeah.
As soon as Dave came out of the cockpit and said, it's going to be a forced landing, and I don't think you were there straight away. You came up straight after that, I think. That Dave told me first, as I was right there, and I sort of felt, right, this is it, and he was looking at me like, yes, this is it, and I knew that. I said, the first thing I said to him was, we'll go and get our procedures booklets and have them ready, and he said, yes, do that, and then he went back into the cockpit. So it's the first thing you do, and it gives you a focus, as Louise says.
I read through the report that you were halfway through one of the passenger briefings when the oxygen mask came out. Did that make a mess of your procedures? Did that sort of throw you?
So I was just going to say, the masks dropped as we were showing them the brace for impact position.
Oh, that would have been fun trying to do about at the same time.
So we were right in the galley, in the aisle, so the passengers could all see us really clearly. We were standing up there, so we just automatically grabbed the mask because that's what you get told to do.
And that was a good show for them. They knew exactly because that's what we did.
But the masks didn't reach at that time down to go down the extra 3 foot. The masks wouldn't reach, and
I think we had difficulty there.
Dave had some problems making his PA, though, didn't
Yeah.
you?
Yes, yeah. I was a bit worried about it.
So you needed oxygen as well as make the PA,
Yeah.
and you had trouble with the lighting, is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And hold on to your booklet that you were reading from
procedures
as
as well.
So Percy will be issued with another 2 arms from now on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you find that the passengers reacted favourably to your messages, or did you have some disruption there?
They did. I was quite surprised, actually.
We were lucky.
Always remembered in our training, you know, when they said, now you tell your passengers this and your passengers will do that. And I always remember thinking, oh, yeah, sure, they'll all be... But they weren't. They sat there, they listened, they did exactly as we directed.
They were
and
perfect
they were great.
passengers.
They were really good.
Did you have a real cross-section, you know, from
No.
old ladies and young girls and
We had a
pregnant mums and...
mainly-
we had a lady with a baby, and we had
They're
Pregnant
mainly,
lady,
pregnant
elder
lady.
lady.
mainly riggers or miners, you know,
Mostly
like fit,
men.
able-bodied
Oh,
men.
that's right, they came from the oil rigs and
Karratha.
the mining camps, didn't they?
So they were, I think they're pretty tuned into safety.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
were
And
really
they've done
switched
the
on.
journey
Yeah.
so many times.
So do you think that would have made a difference to your job?
Yes, made it a lot easier.
Yeah, I think so. But I also think probably the chain of command came down from Phil. He told Dave, Dave told us, we had a procedure to do, we had a job to do. The passengers could see that we were right, this is what we do, and I mean, if we'd been, you know, then I suppose they would have thought, what happens now? But because we said, right, do this, do that, you know, they sort of, right, yes, you know what you're
Positive
doing.
leadership,
Yeah,
that way.
they knew what we were doing, and I think that came right down from you, Phil.
How important was communication in this? Was it if Phil sounded composed and in charge and knew what was going on, was communication a big deal, the method of communication?
Oh, communication's always, in any situation like that, I think communication's everything.
Now, the procedures that you followed, were they all standard procedures, or did you have to modify them to some extent?
I think the standard operating procedures part of it is something that really I was impressed with, because having come into an airline operation where they sort of drum it into you and they give you these procedures to follow, that to see the operation that night sort of go along those guidelines, it made your job a lot easier. And the fact that, you know, I was basically amazed that, you know, in such an emergency we had, where there was no standard emergency, it was an emergency that we'd never been trained for, or even thought could ever happen, that there was procedures which were followed, and that made your job a lot easier.
I noticed in the simulator when you had to cross-check things or whatever, it was just the standard way of cross-checking. Hey, I've turned the generator on, yes, that's confirmed. We've shut the engine down, yes, that's confirmed. Even though you didn't have a definite procedure for it, you had the definite sort of standard training, standard way of doing things, which seemed to make it, to a casual observer, it almost looked boring. Everything just sort of plodded along, and it worked very well, I think.
That's something else on the night that I thought, well, hey, really, are we being too calm for what's happening? I mean, because what you didn't see in the video is some of the language that was used on a particular night, but yeah, certainly...
you tell me that was a perfect recreation. You didn't tell me you left outside.
Yeah, there were things said that night that I don't think you could probably repeat, but certainly that aside, everything else is per the book, and per standard procedures, which was great.
One thing I just wanted to look at, we talk about teamwork a lot, and we talk about the leader doing the right thing and setting the tone and communicating and all that sort of stuff. But how important is it for the team leaders, you know, as two separate teams or a total team, to have a good follower, somebody who fits in and follows along?
As an FO, getting into the cockpit with a strange captain...
How strange?
Well, one that you've never flown with before, you sit back and say, well, who is this guy? And you sort of assess him a little bit, and then becomes the problem of assertion. You know, if you say something, is he going to bite your head off, or is he going to accept it and allow you to make some sort of decisions? And if he's happy with them, we'll go along with him, or you get that into reaction. And I found that with Phil that was very easy to do. Yeah, and if he didn't like something, he'd say it. And on that basis, that night was easy to work with him, and that's important.
How about for you, Dave, as your little section leader or team leader? How important was it the fact that the two people you had to work with did such a good job?
I had every confidence in them, whether that be because the flight going up went smoothly, and that I could see that they worked well. I didn't have to worry about delegating. Everything just ran smoothly because we worked as a team.
Yeah, so it's just as important for them to be really good in their role as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's probably a matter of everybody knowing their role and fulfilling that. You know, there's no power struggle or anything, because we know what everyone's job is to do, and all you've got to worry about is doing your job to the best of your ability, and not worrying about what the others are doing.
Okay, at one stage you have an emergency, but now the emergency is over. Was it difficult to decide that that was the end of the emergency and that we should now transition to normal procedures? Did you have any trouble changing over?
I found it a real shock because we were actually in brace position, like ready, waiting, thinking, waiting for the
felt like forever.
brace signal. It did. It just time has
it was all
a
right when you
stretch
were doing things,
sort of thing. So we were just sitting there waiting because once the mast dropped, we weren't sure what was going on. We thought it turned into a rapid landing, so we took our seats. And when Phil came over and said, flight attendants, get out your seats and say to the passengers, we're going to make a normal landing at Meekatharra. I can't remember the exact wording, but something like that.
If you like. Well, do we like?
It was also, I was really unsure of, you know. So we went out and sourced the passengers, and then he said we're going to make a normal landing at Meekatharra.
How about in the cockpit? Did you have to go through another decision-making process to decide, righto, now what are we going to do?
I suppose so. The whole event was fairly dynamic in as much as the situation was constantly changing. Being static for only a short while when there was no power, the cabin was prepared and secured. And it's interesting that in the back of my mind I was very conscious of the passengers and the flight attendants sitting there waiting for something to happen. And I just couldn't talk to them and reassure them. It just simply wasn't the time.
Okay, we've now landed in Meekatharra, and we look after the passengers because we assume they're stressed. But we don't generally allow for the crew being stressed as well. But you're in a serious situation. Did you feel yourself suffering because of the pressure on you?
Well, naturally enough, I suppose Bev and I were a little apprehensive because we still had no idea what had caused the incident in the first place. We knew that we dealt with it in the best way we knew how, but we weren't sure how that would be seen in the light of day by a board of examiners, if you like. So there's certainly a degree of apprehension in there. It was several hours before we were able to get to Perth. One of the things that I think we did that helped us the most was as soon as the passengers had been taken care of, the flight attendants were looking after the passengers in the terminal, waiting for you to arrive to take them back to Perth. I said to Bevan, all right, well, we're going to go and sit back in the aeroplane and in the cockpit, and we're going to write down as much as we can remember and the order it happened in, so that it's going to make it easier for us to answer questions, but also for information for the investigators to determine what was the problem. So we did that. We got as much as we could on paper. On the way to Perth, I said to Bevan, look, I don't know how this is going to go with the investigation. It is possible we can be separated and, you know, interrogated Gestapo style, or it could be better than that, but that would be the worst scenario. When we arrived in Perth, having, I might have travelled on an F-28, when we arrived in Perth, it was, what time was it, about 2 o'clock in the morning?
2 o'clock, 2:30.
2:30 in the morning. Then I was greeted by the fleet manager and the Brian Poole, flight operations manager. And Bevan and I sat down and told them as much as we could. I said to Bevan, we've got to be honest about what happened, and even if there's warts on it, just tell them what happened. And we treated the matter as frankly as we could, and I believe that was helpful to the way we were treated eventually. Then there was a difficulty of, okay, well, there's going to be an investigation at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and by this time it's 3:30. Go home, get some sleep. Well, I went home and I sat down and typed my notes up, and didn't sleep a great deal. And then the investigation in the afternoon, which was a different matter again.
Well, that's been really interesting talking to you, and I really appreciate your efforts in coming along to discuss this with us. It brings us to the close of this video segment, and I think you can see that the concepts we talk about in theory in our classrooms, in crew resource management training, have worked very effectively here in this incident. The difference that good communications, good teamwork, good decision making have all come together, and they've made a big difference in this incident. Thank you.